big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
Happy July 1st. The Bears are a little over 3-ish weeks away from reporting training camp. They've been on a hiatus, and we have been on a hiatus as well. Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. I'm Usayd, Koshul. A little bit of changes sort of going on here with the show. Nick accepted a head coaching gig in Wisconsin, just to be upfront with you guys. I mean, you guys know that, football was my thing. It was his thing too. Whenever we started to go ahead and when we started talking about the show, Nick was like, hey, well, if I accept the head coaching gig, I'm probably not going to do the show anymore because I don't want to put all this time and effort into it. So that's what we've been trying to do over the last month or so here at the Bear Report, figure out who is going to be Nick's replacement. So it was a process, but I'm happy to welcome on Steve Letizia to the show, better known on Twitter as Chicago Football Connection, aka at CFC Bears. Steve, how's it going? Excited to have you on here. I mean, this is going to be super. Yeah. I feel like with all the times that you and I have interacted on Twitter, now we're literally bringing our Twitter conversations to the mic and to the world of podcasts plus YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I got big shoes to fill. Nick is awesome. I follow him on Twitter too, but we did a little test one and I thought we had some good chemistry. So I'm excited to be part of this, to help grow it. It's already pretty big, but I want to, make it even bigger. But I'm really just excited to talk Bears football. We've all taken a little hiatus in the little dog days of summer, but we're back into it. Bears reporting training camp this month. So we're back.
I know. I think it was the NBC sports graphic because NBC's got the Hall of Fame game every year, and it's like, well, DJ Ukulele plus like someone else is playing as the quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame game. But they put, I think, Jared Goff and Justin Herbert on the cover. But I think we have to start by talking about some of these Bears rookies. And to me, I mean, we'll talk about Colston Loveland. We'll have to discuss Ozzie Trapilo, but I think there's an argument to be made that of the 7 to 8 rookies the Bears have, I would say Luther Burden is going to be the guy that has the biggest year one impact. I mean, the reason being is because historically, if we look at tight end and offensive tackle, focusing on the Bears' first couple draft picks here, those guys usually take, I want to say, a year and a half to really start contributing and popping off. Luther Burden, on the other hand, though, plays a position where historically we've seen rookie receivers come into the league, and for some reason they are able to figure it out ASAP. Plus, I'm going to throw this bone to the audience as well. If you look at the mock drafts for 2025, last year at this time, going into August, September, October, November, Luther Burden was kind of the one guy over the last, I want to say, 2 draft cycles when people were examining this draft class that everyone was like, that guy's a first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, the talent is absolutely there. And I like how you brought up the fact that, at this point last year, he was pretty much wide receiver 1, or at the very worst, wide receiver 2 going into the draft class, the 25 NFL draft. Obviously, last college football season didn't really go the way he or anyone else wanted it, but the talent is obviously there. So if we're talking about who's going to be the biggest impact rookie for the Bears, it's Loveland and Burden, I think. I mean, like you said, we can talk about Trapilo a little bit, but Loveland and Burden, those are the guys that were brought in. Those are Ben Johnson's guys. They're going to be brought in to make an impact. They're not going to be sitting on the bench for too long. Both of them kind of have guys in front of them that they kind of have to compete with just snap share and target share. But I think Burden has a more easy process to get into the rotation maybe than Loveland does. Like you said, tight ends, it's tough to be a tight end and transition to the NFL. Not a lot of guys can do it. We saw it with Sam Laporta, so that gives me some hope. But I don't think we should be expecting a Sam Laporta rookie season from Loveland since we have Kmet already in fold. So I think Burden is the guy. He doesn't have to step in right away and be a number 1 wide receiver like a lot of rookie draft picks have to be. He can settle into that slot role, that number 3 option role. And his stat line might not really jump off the page at the end of the year, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be impactful. I think that's very important. So I think he does have a pretty clear path to be the biggest rookie contributor.
I mean, I look at it this way, is that I remember Ben Johnson saying, well, Jamison Williams plus Luther Burden are the exact same players. Now, in a sense, I kind of hate some of these pro to pro player comps, and the reason being is because every team has a little bit of wrinkles in terms of their system. I mean, but to be fully honest, I remember it's like when the Bears hired Shane Waldron and then drafted Rome Odunze, everyone was like, well, Rome's going to be DK Metcalf for this team. And then obviously come to realize pretty quickly that like maybe Rome doesn't need to be a DK Metcalf type player, or the Bears don't have to use him like that. I do believe it's the same sort of context here with Luther Burden, in the sense that even though Luther and Williams were teammates in high school, they are not going to be guys that have the exact same role, because I think the personnel grouping starts to get a little bit more interesting here, where it's like the Lions have Amon-Ra St. Brown plus Jamison Williams plus some of these bigger guys like Tim Patrick. But focusing on the receivers here, I do think that what makes Burden expendable is that he also makes Rome Odunze and DJ Moore a little bit more expendable than maybe people want to admit, because DJ Moore can also kind of play that Amon-Ra St. Brown / Jamison Williams role. I look at everything else here when it comes to Luther Burden and just what he's able to do. I think it's very clear that, they're going to use him as a guy that can stretch the field horizontally on some of those perimeter runs. They're also going to have him on some occasions take the top off of defense. But to me, and I'm curious to know your viewpoint on this, I mean, it seems like with Luther Burden, he is this type of player where the Bears are going to use him to throw a different wrinkle or even 2 or 3 at the defense every single week, because they know his presence alone is going to start to open up opportunities for the rest of the playmakers on offense.
Yeah, I think so. I think for sure, regardless of how you felt about Luther Burden in the draft, where you had him in your rankings, I don't care. But he was clearly the best run after catch receiver in the draft. And that's something that he can bring. That's something that translates right away. They're going to use him a lot on some scheme touches, wide receiver screens. They're going to get him involved early, and that will help his transition to the NFL, because he doesn't have to run a real diverse route tree maybe right away. You got to hope he develops into that guy. But I want to see him, them using him out of the backfield. I want to see them moving him around a lot, just to kind of create mismatches, because I think you can get him matched up on a linebacker. He can really do some damage, and especially in the screen game, just use him as a kind of an offensive weapon. And that opens up, DJ Moore, who could also be used in that way, but opens up DJ Moore and Rome Odunze to be used more as your traditional, wide receivers, which I think they're going to be better at, year one than Luther Burden is. But yeah, I want to see him just be a mismatch nightmare, more of that. I don't want to say a gadget guy, because I think he's way more than that, but at least early on, get him some scheme touches, get him involved in the offense as soon as you can.
All right, you brought up, I think, a really good point here in terms of you don't want Luther Burden to be that gadget guy, and I totally agree. I'm going to throw this out there because, again, you sort of mentioned putting him in the backfield. I mean, the Bears have, I guess, these... I'm not going to call it an issue at the running back position, but I'm going to say there's uncertainty at the running back position, which, again, we'll talk about in a few minutes here when we get to the third segment in the show. But to me, I would go ahead and say this, is that you can definitely use him to create some mismatches. And I do think that if your running game needs sort of a spark plug, Luther Burden can go and be that guy. You see, to me, it's very interesting because players that, make it to the NFL, there's 2 things I feel like that happens. Number one, most of these guys in high school pretty much played all over the place, right? They were playing some, in Luther Burden's case, because he's a skill guy, he probably played some corner and safety, probably played, some running back as well, which, again, he spent part of his career in high school at East St. Louis, Illinois, which, as I've mentioned on the show, East St. Louis is a powerhouse for the class that they're in for football. I mean, they've been to the state championship game like 5 or 6 of the last 7 or 8 years. They're that good of a team. But I think with, Luther Burden, I mean, he played all over the place in high school, so it's going to be easy for him to kind of get acclimated to being the guy that they continue to move around. But also, like you mentioned, the whole idea of, well, he makes DJ Moore and Rome Odunze expendable and opens up opportunities for them. I do think part of this is also Ben Johnson, Declan Doyle, JT Barrett, Antoine Randall, their personal philosophy of basically saying, yeah, we're not just going to tell these guys, oh, you have to stick in one spot for the whole season and that's it. We're going to move these guys around because it's going to make everything so much easier, and then constantly just keep the defense guessing as to, number one, who's getting the ball, but number two, what type of play call is coming.
Yeah, and I don't think it makes DJ Moore expendable. I know there's a lot of talk about like trading DJ Moore. I don't want that at all. I think you need to have 4 good wide receivers on your team to be a successful offense. They don't all have to be 4 number 1 wide receivers, but you got to have 4 guys who you feel comfortable kind of stepping in. And I think they have that in Burden and Odunze and Moore and Zacchaeus. I think they have a good rotation there. I think they all are just going to work and complement off each other. You're going to be able to move them around. The defense is going to not know what's coming because you have guys who can play in multiple different roles. So it helps you disguise things a little bit. So, maybe, if Luther Burden comes in and just lights the world on fire and looks like he can be a number 1 wide receiver, maybe that point you could look, and maybe in the offseason, trading someone. But I would rather just have all 3 of those guys and just make it a mismatch nightmare for offense for defenses.
Sissy, I love that you brought that up. And when I say expendable, I should say expendable not in terms of moving him around, but I mean expendable in terms of what the Bears are able to do on the field personnel-wise and all that. But the other thing I'm going to say is this, is, if you had told me, I mean, this is what Ryan Pohl's 4th season, when they drafted Rome Odunze last year, Keenan Allen and DJ Moore were already on the roster, okay? But, and I've said this consistently, so our listeners are probably, I guess, tired of me saying it, but I still think that it's true to this day. And I'm going to rephrase it in new context. Last year, if you had told me that the 3rd best wide receiver on the Bears was going to be a top 10 pick, I would have looked at you and been like, okay, you're freaking crazy. Like, what, world do you come from? Because this is finally, I think, a franchise that has made an extended effort to build through the draft, which, again, in our lifetimes, they've just never really been good at. Plus, stack playmakers at positions and talent at positions that are highly valuable, right? So I think you look at it and it's like, well, you had Rome Odunze and you had DJ Moore. There's not really a need for Luther Burden, but he was the highest graded player on the board. Similarly, you could have probably traded out of 10, gotten more picks, but you decided to stay there and take Colson Loveland because you want to get more explosive in the passing game, even though you have Cole Kmet. But then also you invested in Grady Jarrett and Javon Dexter, but you're going to go out here and take Shamar Turner anyway. And then you had 2 guys that probably could start at left tackle, but you still took Ozzie Trapilo. So again, the moral of the story, I think, here is this, that the Bears are finally doing things in a way that a lot of the other good teams around the league are doing. But I'm going to go ahead and say this, though, to my point about the 3rd best receiver on this roster being a top 10 pick. Fast forward, I think, 15, 16 months or something, and now all of a sudden the 3rd best receiver is a top 40 pick, which, again, this franchise has never really had. So that's why I think the more playmakers you have, the better. Like, I'm not concerned about, guys getting touches, because football is always going to be more fun when everyone's winning, and, the touches take a back seat to when everyone's winning.
Yes, that is a very good point that I was just going to bring up. Like, guys are okay with not having great stat lines if you're winning. If you're not winning games and DJ Moore isn't getting 7, 8 targets a game, then you might, have some issues. But yeah, I think, this is not you. I think this is Bears Twitter in general. It focuses too much on stats sometimes. I do the same thing. So it's just kind of human nature as a fan of a team to check the box score after and be like, oh, this guy had a down year or whatever it is. But when you have 3 guys who can get open consistently, it just makes it 4 guys, if Loveland is who we think it is too, it just makes it impossible to defend. So even if a receiver's not getting the ball on a given play or a target, that doesn't mean he's not making an impact. So I think the more weapons you have just makes it so much more difficult to defend, and it's going to lead to wins, and then no one's going to care that they only got 3 targets in that game because we're going to the playoffs consistently and we have a great offense.
Okay, I have to switch over to the other side of the ball now because Montez Sweat's here, Dayo Odeyingbo's here. The Bears have some defensive tackles that, again, through fan-led speculation, has people thinking that maybe, so-and-so is going to not be getting so many reps at defensive tackle, instead be playing defensive end. But then through all sort of the madness and the storm here, there's Austin Booker, who, again, if you don't remember, had 8 sacks in his final season in college, 2023 with Kansas. I mean, he's a guy that's 6'6", right around 248, 250 pounds. Definitely fits what Dennis Allen is looking for on the defensive side of the ball in terms of edge rushers. And then the raw athleticism is there. Now, Booker, to me, becomes a really fun case study to monitor here over the next basically 6 to 10 weeks. And the reason being is because, yes, the Bears have Dayo Odeyingbo and Montez Sweat in front of him. But if you look beyond Odeyingbo and Sweat, and then you look beyond Booker, I get they got Xavier Carlson, I believe, but there's not really anything there that makes me think, okay, anyone's going to push Booker. So I think that, when we talk about that third edge rusher, to me, it is Austin Booker's to lose. But part of it is also you need him to come out and have a good showing, because if he doesn't, then you're only going to have 2 good pass rushers. And, pass rushers is a position like wide receiver where teams want to have 3, 4, 5 good pass rushers. And again, the Bears didn't add an edge rusher this offseason besides Odeyingbo, which means that they are banking on Booker taking that next step.
Yeah, and they must believe in him, or at least someone in the room, to not go out and kind of get another guy. I'll preface this conversation with saying I think they're eventually going to bring in another pass rusher, a vet off the street. But just for this conversation, let's assume they don't do that, because otherwise we're just speculating. But I do think that's what's going to happen. But I do think Booker, like you said, it's a big 6 to 8 weeks for him now. He really needs to kind of take the reins and show that he can get off after the passer. I mean, like you said, he doesn't have much competition behind him. You got Dominic Robinson, who's been not very good, although I did see some reports that he looked good in OTAs, but take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, Xavier Carlton, like you said, Daniel Hardy has been kind of working with the linebackers some, I've heard. So yeah, those are the guys behind him. So there's not a lot there in terms of talent potential. So Booker, this is a big moment for him. And I hope he can kind of take over that situational, not situational, third pass rusher role, and kind of run with it. So maybe they don't have to, sign someone in the offseason. But I think he showed enough flashes last year where you could be hopeful, but not enough flashes where you think he's just going to come in and kind of light the world on fire. I really liked him coming out of college. I was really high on him. He's got the size and length, that Dennis Allen likes, but I don't know if he has the bulk that Dennis Allen likes. So it's because, like you said, he's like 240, 245, something like that. I think they would probably want him to add on 10, 15 pounds, which is not easy to do, but he needed to do it anyway. So I was actually more bullish on him, weirdly, in Matt Eberflus's defense than I am, for Dennis Allen, just because Dennis Allen likes his guys to play, a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. He's not going to be lining up in a wide 9 alignment, where I think his athleticism and his long strides can kind of really stress offensive tackles. And I don't think he can really hold up against the run when he's playing that close to the line of scrimmage. I hope he proves me wrong there, but I think he like, kind of going back a little bit, he has all the potential in the world. He has all the athleticism. He has the length. So it's just about putting it together. I do think now he's going to be coached a hell of a lot better by Dennis Allen and the defensive line coach. So hopefully that helps too. But we'll see. I hope he just takes the job and kind of runs with it.
I was actually going to mention that I finally finished up the Breakout Bears article series and the Austin Booker article, which, again, the whole series, guys, is live on the Bear Report website. But the part that I struggled with when it came to Austin Booker is I felt like at times Yannick Ngakoue was out there. We saw like a younger Yannick Ngakoue, or we saw like a younger version of 2020 Robert Quinn, where, teams would just straight up run at Austin Booker because they kind of knew that he was the liability. Now, I think you also have to add on this context here by saying that 50% of the issues last year is that you're talking about a rookie defensive end. The other 50% of it, I think, is the fact that there was just so much inconsistency top to bottom for what the Bears had to deal with, for what these players had to deal with last year. I mean, it got to a point last year where I asked DeMarcus Walker a question in the locker room, and I'm like, well, what do you think some of these younger players can learn with all the changes going on? He pretty much sighed at me and was just like, listen, the only thing I can tell you is that control whatever it is you can control. Go ahead and just do your job, because that's really the best thing you can do, because change is the way of life in the NFL. And I think that, you look at this rookie class last year, and Booker is one of those players that I think a lot of people had higher expectations for, and they should still have high expectations for him, but because of all the craziness, the instability, and the changes that went on, I mean, he was never really given a fair shake to go ahead and develop.
Yeah, I agree. The coaching staff was a mess last year, and we talk about with Caleb Williams a lot. I think some of the other players on the roster don't always get the same leeway. So I think that's fair to say with Booker as well. Like I said, he has all the potential in the world. And I really liked him coming out of college. So, I mean, we kind of do need him to step up, though, because we're not going to survive with Montez Sweat and Dio as just, those are the only guys generating pass rush. We need a third guy, and of the guys that are currently on the roster, at least on the edge, that's the guy that needs to kind of do it. So he's definitely going to be the guy that I'm watching very closely when I go to training camp. I know it's training camp practices, so you can't really learn too much, but mostly I just want to see where he is in the rotation. That's really what you can glean from these training camp practices, is who's getting that third rep. He was getting that first rep with the second team versus who's getting, working with the threes and fours. So it'll be interesting for sure.
Just saying, Xavier Carlton, I think, has a legit chance at being this year's Bears preseason MVP, because there's always one UDFA every single year that seems to pop off in the preseason and then is nowhere to be found when it comes to the regular season. But I got to ask you this. We've talked a little offense. We've talked a little defense. I think it's time to bring both the units together here. I mean, biggest worries on offense and defense, I feel like. I don't have any worries with the defense. I will say my biggest worry on offense, though, is the running back room. And the reason being is because everyone's sitting there and is like, well, Ben Johnson traded away DeAndre Swift when they were in Detroit. But you look at everything and it's like, we need to stop using that argument at this point, because that was the Detroit Lions offense. That was Ben Johnson's Detroit Lions offense for Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Plus, they traded him away when the Lions were, I think, 9-8, or they had just gone 9-8. Like, they weren't the Detroit Lions we know now. And then you come here to Chicago, and it's like you got Roschon Johnson plus DeAndre Swift, Kyle Menendez on the roster. I mean, they have a running game. Is it the best running game? No. Is it a running back room that's star-studded like we're used to seeing? Not really. I mean, they haven't had a long-term starter at the running back position since Matt Forte left town. So to me, on offense, I mean, I think every position is pretty much set for the most part. We'll talk Ozzy Trapilo on call the next episode, but to me, I mean, this running back room, like, that's a major worry for me, because if you can't run the ball, as crazy as it sounds in this pass-happy league, you are not going to be a good offense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, DeAndre Swift, he is what he is. We know who DeAndre Swift is. That we shouldn't be going back to 4 or 5 years ago when he was with Ben Johnson and say, like, he could do that again. Here's the thing with DeAndre Swift. I fully expect his numbers to look better on paper than they did last year, because he's going to be in a more competent offense. Ben Johnson's going to scheme. The run game is going to have, better scheme. The run blocking is going to be a little bit better. But we know who DeAndre Swift is. If you can get DeAndre Swift in space, if you can get him to the third level, yeah, he can make stuff happen there. The problem is he can't get to the third level by he doesn't create. He's not creative. He's not as shifty in a box that he can't get there on his own. He has to be schemed up. You have to be very creative with him. So that's just a guy that's, in my mind, very replaceable. So like I said, I think his numbers are going to look better, but I still think he's, regardless of what happens, he's a guy you need to replace next offseason. I think that's for sure, the biggest issue with the offense. I'm going to throw out another one out there, though. I'm still a little bit concerned about the offensive line. I'll be honest. It's going to be better for sure. It's improved. No questions there. But I wasn't a big fan of Jonah Jackson. He's a guy who's been injured a lot in his career. He was injured last year. Drew Dalman, I like. He was also injured last year. Joe Tooney, I love, obviously. He's also getting older. I think Bears fans may have a tendency to say, oh, that was bad. We got new players, therefore it's going to be better. There is a world where, if Jonah Jackson is ineffective, if Drew Dalman gets hurt, a couple things go wrong, one injury on the offensive line, I don't trust anyone kind of on our bench to step up and play at a high level. So one injury to the offensive line, I think it could really blow things up there. So running back would be the first kind of worry for me on offense, but I do think we need to talk a little bit more about the depth on the offensive line and Jonah Jackson at right guard. I'm still not sold on.
I am glad you brought that up because I was talking to someone earlier today and I'm like, well, yes, they improved on offense. Yeah, they improved the offensive line, but I'm worried about the offensive line in terms of the depth because let's call it how it is. Like at this point, 4 of your 5 positions are pretty much set. Okay. Now, the fact that they knew Braxton Jones was going to be healthy going into 2025, but they still spent a big pick on Ozzy Trapilo shows me that they, at left tackle, do not want this to be a Braxton Jones Karan Amagaji competition. No, they want to have Ozzy Trapilo because they view him as being the long-term starter for this team because Braxton I think is like 6'4", 6'5". Trapilo's 6'8", and the guy moves like a tank to be honest with you guys. But going into some of the O-line depth, you bring up a really good point. It is a bit of a worry here because the question is throughout the Ryan Poles era, they've never really had good depth across the entire unit as a whole. I mean, I would even argue this is that one of the worries I do have on offense is that the Bears, when you get to that, second, third, fourth string in certain positions, I mean, there's not a lot of depth there that is really significant because yes, you've got Jonah Jackson, but again, Jonah Jackson with his contract, you're hoping he's able to stay healthy. I know that they went ahead and they drafted Luke Newman this year, but again, Luke Newman, I think, is a guy that people forget he was playing at Holy Cross, which I had a chance to coach Newman's quarterback when he was in high school. Fun little fact there. But people forget Newman was at Holy Cross, left there, then went to a bigger program in Michigan State, was essentially there for a year. And, the Bears are one of those teams that, being right there in the middle of Big Ten country, you would think that they have a good read on some of these Big Ten prospects. But again, we know that sometimes that always does not work out. Then you start to look at the other possible quote unquote interior player that they have, and that's Ryan Bates, which again, you traded a pick for him. He's been on your radar for forever, but hasn't really done much. You don't know what he's going to end up doing. And then you're really hoping some of these guys like McFadden or Bill Murray, Josh Miles can finally step up and figure it out. But that, depth across the O-line room, I will say this right now, there's one guy that I would feel confident in after a year of development, after an offseason of development, and that is Karan Amagaji. The rest of it, though, I feel like when the Bears are in training camp, I'm going to be more interested in seeing the second and third string than seeing what the first string is able to do. I mean, the first string's important, but what's behind that first string, I think, is going to be more important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, three out of our 5 projected starters had season-ending injuries last year. That's Jackson, Dahlman, and Braxton Jones. So you're gonna face injuries on the offensive line. It's inevitable. Every team does, whether they're season-ending injuries, nagging injuries. It doesn't matter. You're going to face it. So yeah, that's a real concern with me. And with Luke Newman, I like Luke Newman, but like you said, he was at Holy Cross 2 years ago. I think I view him as more of like a redshirt guy. Get him on the practice squad for a year, get him a little bit stronger. And then you got like Ryan Bates, and so we'll see. I actually feel good about the tackle. I love Donner Wright, obviously. I think between Braxton Jones and Ozzie Trapillo, like they'll be okay there at least. But the interior, it can be a little scary with just one injury.
Yeah, it's. Oh, I forgot to also mention the Bears have Hard Knocks star Theo Bennett, I believe, coming back for another season. So I guess this team is that going for them. But I guess the other big worry that I kind of have on offense is this, right? And again, I'm never going to be someone that like hits the panic button with this team, just because I've kind of come to accept this team for what it is. But I would say this is that there's going to need to be progress made on offense. But the question I worry about is how quickly does this team start to make that progress on offense? Because for a fact, when the weather's nice and warm in September and the early parts of October, then it's like your offense can afford to be a little bit, sloppy, somewhat sluggish as this team tries to figure out the identity. But then when you get into I want to say that window between Halloween plus Thanksgiving, that 4-week window right there is when I really think that this offense has to start hitting its stride, because it's that window right there that's going to tell us, okay, is this a Bears team that's going to the playoffs and is going to compete for a wild card spot, or is this a team that is probably headed toward another top 20 pick, mid first round pick at best?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Couldn't have said it better. I think on the defensive side of the ball, we kind of talked about the pass rush a little bit, so I have a concern there as well. But another concern I have the defense is the linebacker position, because I think the linebackers we have aren't bad, but I don't think they're really what Dennis Allen's looking for in a linebacker. I mean, look, Ruben Hippolyte, say what you want about him in the draft, that's the linebacker kind of prototype that Dennis Allen wants, smaller, speed guy. And, Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, those guys aren't that guy. So I think that's my biggest concern on the defense, besides the pass rush, which we kind of already talked about, is how that linebacker room is going to look. And I think it's going to look a lot different going into next year than it does right now.
Because we're getting close we're a little over 30 minutes here, but I will leave y'all on this note. I don't know how much scouting you've done in terms of some of these SEC linebackers, but I think it might be time for Bears fans to start getting familiar with Harold Perkins and Deontay Lawson from LSU and Alabama, respectively. But I also kind of wonder, is it too late to go back and redo the Roquan Smith trade and, not let that trade happen again, or are we kind of moving on here?
If only, man. If only. It just goes to show, when you have all pro players, just keep them. Just keep them.
Anyways, we're going to get out of this thing. I'm sure we'll be back later this week with another episode, but make sure you guys check us out on Twitter at Halas, at Usayd Koshul, at CFC Bears. All right. Check out the Bear Report on Twitter as well, at Bear Report. Make sure you're liking, commenting, subscribing to the YouTube channel. If there is anything you guys want to see us discuss, be sure to tweet at me or the Halas account. You guys can comment on YouTube as well. We're going to do our best to continue responding to all those comments so that we can sort of get some conversation going. Obviously, as much as this is mine and Steve's show, it is your guys' show as well. So don't, be afraid to be like, hey, we would really love to see this topic discussed. We're still going to try and stick to this Tuesday, Thursday format for the foreseeable future, doing whatever 1 to 2 episodes a week. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the 4th of July. If you don't hear from us, bear down, and we're one day closer to Bears football returning.